order soon. We don't order the place.
Yeah, thank you for that text. Okay. It's amazing when you go onto this to Zoom on the phone, so you're automatically muted, even though I'm the speaker, but it's not my Zoom account, so I'm automatically muted. I have to press unmute. And I was thinking, like, wouldn't that be convenient in life, you know? If every time you talked, you had to press unmute.
And then if you forget.
You know? You know, things would probably be a little quieter and a little more peaceful. You know? You scream at someone, you'd be like, no, I'm still muted. But you don't want to forget it.
Just get it out. It doesn't affect anything.
Yeah. It's like the emails people write and they don't send, you know. There's this feature that your email, when you press send, doesn't send for a minute.
It's 20 seconds, just in case you want to know.
You mean in case you change your
20
mind?
seconds.
Yeah.
You can say stupid things in life.
You could vent. You could
It's
vent or rant.
an undue send.
It's like, you know, back in
Yeah,
the
at
old,
least on
the
my
ancient
list.
days, we would write a letter to somebody,
Right.
and then maybe
And then
even put a
save it.
stamp on it, but never mail it, you know.
I know somebody who wrote that he wrote letters to the people that he resented, and he mailed it, but he just didn't put a stamp on it.
And no return address.
Yeah. Okay. So I really had every intention not to say the shir tonight. You know that. Okay? And the pressure started when my wife noticed on the shir last week that I was like, probably we won't have next week. And then the Nashim Tzidkani by this table, like, no, of course we should have a shir. So that my wife made note of that. And then tonight I was in Yehudis' house and my wife was there also, and I was like, it makes sense not to have a share the night before Tinus Esther, right? They were like, no, you don't understand, we saved our laundry already for the Wednesday night share. So I'm very mechuzak that you are pushing for the share and appreciate the share, and it gives me a lot of chizuk. And I want to share with you a very, very special thought that's I think is an element for us to think about going into Purim, especially this year. I think you'll appreciate it. There's a fascinating conversation that takes place in the Megillah between Esther and Achashverosh. And in the conversation, Achashverosh mamish sounds like a politician, like today's politicians. And I don't think that that's a deep enough understanding of what's happening in those psukim, because the fact that politicians today speak in a ridiculous way, that's the politicians of today. But in the Kisvei Kodesh, the way Esther wrote the Megillah, there had to have been a cheshbon for things. And I want to describe to you that conversation, and I hope you'll be as perturbed by the conversation as I am, and then I'll share with you the approach that I think could really, really, really play in to an appreciation of the things that we deal with in our lives on Purim. So Haman is hung, or later on in the Megillah, Haman is hung. The last part of the Megillah is not so easy. You know, the beginning of the story unfolds, but at a certain point they're making the Yontif, and there's the Yontif, and there's the wars, and the first day and the second day. Like you have to you have to follow it. But at some point, after Haman is hung, so there's something called Beis Haman, the house of Haman. And there's a big deal in the Megillah that the house of Haman was given to Esther, and that Esther appoints Mordechai to be in charge of the house of Haman. Now, this has got to be a big deal if the Psukim talk about it. It cannot be a small house on on Farmington. Okay, the base Haman must be, nothing against houses on Farmington.
They're fine for one
Okay?
person.
Just picking a random
I know,
street.
I know.
Okay. So I mean, the base Haman must represent some. I mean, maybe it's worth discussing, but the base Haman, the house of Haman, must represent something, and maybe even practically was something enormous. That it was a big deal that a king gifted the house of Haman to Esther, and Esther put Mordechai in charge of this house. Okay? Now, after that, there was a big problem, and that was the Jews were still supposed to be killed on the 13th day of Adar. That hadn't changed. So Esther had to come back to Achashverosh to ask him to do something about the Gzeira, the decree, that the Yidden would be killed on the 13th day of Adar. So Esther comes in, the Psukim describe, she comes in front of the king, she starts to cry, Vatefch, she's Neufel El Raglo, she falls at the feet of the king, Vatischanein Loi, and she starts to plead with him, and the pasuk says that the Melech, as he always did when Esther came in, he sticks out his Sharvet Hazav. This is after Haman was hung. Once again, he puts out his Sharvet Hazav, which she touches, and then she gets up, as was the minik, that she would get up and she was able to stay there once the king's scepter touched her. And then she starts to make her case, and she says to please, Imala Melech Toiv, v'kosher ani be'enov, if I have found favor in the eyes of the king, if it makes sense to you, to please rescind lahashiv es hasvarim, to please rescind the decree of Esther of Haman, because even though Haman is dead, his decree was not dead. And then she says those famous words, Ki eichacha uchal v'ro'isi be'ovdan moiladati. How can I watch the destruction of my people? And Achashverosh, and I want you to focus on this moment because it's very important. Achashverosh just heard a plea for the life of an entire nation. Men, women, and children, old and young. That's what was on the table now. The entire Jewish nation. And Esther was saying, please repeal the decree. So Achashverosh says, I gave the house of Haman to Esther. And I hung Haman on a tree. That's what I mean, he sounded like a politician. What was that, one of your talking points? I just asked you to save my people. I am crying. I am begging. Ki eichacha uchal v'ro'isi b'ra asher yimtza es ami. How can I witness? I know I'm the queen, I'll be saved. But how can I witness this tragedy? And the Melech is listening to this plea from the tzaddikus of the generation. His queen, who's crying, who just got up off the floor to plead with him. And he's like, I gave you the base Haman. Is that an appropriate response? And then he goes on to say, go ahead, send out decrees of your own. I cannot rescind a decree once it is made. But you could send out another decree, and that's what they did. They sent out another decree that the Jews could defend themselves. By the way, one of the most incredible things in the Megillah is that they then went on to rejoice. They were happy once they realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was on their side, even though there was still a war to be won. They were like Yehudim Ha'isa'ir v'simcha v'sasim vikar. It says like Yehudim Ha'isa'ir v'simcha v'sasim vikar before the war, because they, as Zeresh pointed out to Haman, in Mizera HaYehudim Mordechai asher achilai salin par lefanav, you could tell where this is going. And if Haman wound up on the tree, don't worry about the war. But But what's going on? What is this conversation? I ask you to save my people. You tell me you gave me a house? It's bizarre. One year, a couple of years ago, we were doing our little minig in our house on Purim that we do sometimes when there's a bunch of men around the table at some point on Purim afternoon before the Suda. We take out a Chumash, turn to Megillah Esther, we point on a pasuk, and we just pass around the Megillah Esther and ask everyone to talk about that pasuk. And this pasuk came up one year. Some of my best varts on Megillah Esther came from those conversations with the Talmidei Chachamim and the Yungalayit and the Balabatim of the community. And here's what I think is going on here. And it's a really, really, really important yisaid. No. Achashverosh was not being a politician. I want to explain to you what message was coming from Achashverosh, because it was really coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this message. I'll give you a mashal or two. Some of these mashalim might be familiar to you from other shiurim, but I think it's good to give some mashalim for this. Sometimes the nimshal is hard. When we talk about challenges, the nimshal is hard. I like to talk about mashalim, then we'll talk about the nimshal. But I've shared with you in the past a story of a certain Sudas Haidah that I attended many, many years ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael, when a man that I knew, a big Talmid Chacham, had a stroke, and he went through a long period of recovery, until he finally was able to actually make a Sudas Haidah, a Suda for Hashem, thanking Hashem for making him better. And this was a big Talmid Chacham. He's still alive today. And he was a Talmud of Reb Shlomo Zalman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Big Talmud Chacham with a beautiful mishpacha. And it was mostly mishpacha by the Suda. But I had the schus to be invited to this Suda. And what I saw was, what I witnessed by that Suda was transformative. This person, he still had a patch on one eye. He gets up to speak by his Suda Saidah. He had a stroke. Okay, they thought, even when they realized that he wasn't going to die, they thought he forgot everything. Until slowly but surely he started to realize that his faculties were returning, and he was able to continue learning Torah. He remained a Talmid Chacham. It was a huge, huge, huge thing. And he gets up, and he spoke in Hebrew, but he had like a very, very beautiful, expressive, articulate way of speaking. And he said, "What am I thankful for? That Hashem made me better? He's also the one that made me sick." Which is an uncomfortable truth to think about by a Suda Saidah. So he said, I want to tell you a mashal. Now this mashal, I didn't know Hebrew so well, so I had to kind of piece together what he was saying. But I'll tell you the piece together mashal. A caterpillar is a very, very free animal. In fact, I don't think he said this, but in fact, caterpillars, if you've seen them in the summer, they could climb up vertical. They could climb vertically. Okay? We can't do that. Okay? So they literally can go wherever they want. There's nothing that stops them. Maybe water stops them. They can go wherever they want. And this caterpillar, our little friend, the caterpillar, is walking wherever he wants. Up trees, down trees, rocks, this. He goes wherever he wants. And then one day, his life ends. He's trapped in a cocoon. It's dark. It's prison. He can't move. He can't climb. There's no sunlight. There's nothing. It's just dark and trapped. And some time passes. And suddenly one day, the cocoon parts and a butterfly flies out. And now this caterpillar realizes he thought he was free then, but he can fly. He's become a beautiful butterfly, and he can fly. He says, this butterfly turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't just say, thank you for taking me out of the cocoon. He says, thank you for putting me into the cocoon and taking me out of the cocoon. Because of that time in my prison, I became a butterfly. Said this Rav. The illness that I went through and the journey that I went through to get better changed me. And I have a different sense of life. And I have a different appreciation of my relationship with Hashem. And I'm not the same person that I was before I got sick. So he declared by his Sudas Haidah, I'm not here merely to thank Hashem for getting better. I'm here to thank Hashem for getting sick and for getting better. Can you imagine? Imagine a young bacher hearing that? And the truth is that it's a little bit of an insight because we all, without exception, I'm not here to measure our burdens next to other people's burdens. But all of us, without exception, carry burdens. And not only that, not only do we carry burdens as yechidim, but we carry burdens as a community, as a tzibur. Especially now, last year or two, since October 7th, our world changed. And the world changed. And we no longer, what we stopped doing? We stopped having shmooze and how it doesn't feel like we're in Gullus. Did you notice that? Remember? Do you remember when we used to talk about, I know it doesn't feel like we're in Gullus, but we're in Gullus. We haven't heard that shmooze in a long time. We are in Gullus. We get it. We know it. We feel it. So as individuals and as a tzibur, we're carrying a lot. And sometimes we turn to Hashem, and I can only speak for myself, that I know that I've done this many times. And I ask Hashem, lahashiv es asfarim, to please repeal the gzeira. I don't want this challenge. Sometimes I have challenges with my own midos, that I struggle with things. And I just wish Hashem would just take the challenge away. Sometimes I have a challenge with things that I'm struggling with in my family or other areas of my life. You ever had that feeling? I don't want to get through it. I just don't want it. Take it away. Make it better. Mashal l'ma'ad over daima. What would be a good mashal for this? The mashal would be for someone to go to the gym with their fancy personal trainer, and the personal trainer says, I would like you to go into this machine and to lift a certain amount of weights. And the personal trainer sets up the weights, and you're struggling with it. I had a personal trainer for a few months. It wasn't really a personal trainer, but it was a guy who was trained to be a personal trainer. I paid him a little bit, and I also schmoozed with him. And he, to help me do exercise, we got special access to Lander's gym on Friday mornings when no one was there, and I did exercise. What a nightmare. Okay? Because he's telling me, this guy, move the thing, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. It's heavy, it's difficult, I don't want to do that. And I had that feeling. You want me to move the thing, take the weights off, and I'll move it, it'll be no problem. Come on. We can make this work. But if you move the weights without weights on them, nothing happens. You're not transformed. You don't grow. You don't become stronger or healthier. And our weights are like that also. The emotional weights that we carry, the physical weights that we carry, meaning the problems that we deal with, the challenges that we deal with, those are also weights. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to march through life with those weights and to try to manage, to believe in Him and to trust Him and to serve Him despite those weights. So we tell Hashem, take off the weights. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to take off the weights. Because that's how we're going to become who we are. Because we went through those weights. You know, everyone has their own story. And, you know, in a certain way, I could share my own perspective on some of these things with a certain sense of respect for everyone else's experience, because no two people's experiences are the same. And it's presumptuous of one person to assume that his experience is like someone else's experience. But I live a very, very, very interesting life right now, and a very, very special life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me that I did not ask for. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me into a place where I spend a lot of time every day listening to people discuss their weights. And I spend a lot of time every day doing that. And I'm awed from Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is unbelievable. I could sit and cry just thinking about the weights, but also thinking about the strength of the people carrying those weights. But you know what I realize? I have weights of my own. I had very, very difficult times in my life. I struggled internally, externally. And I know for a fact, without any suffix whatsoever, that had I not struggled with the things that I struggled with, I would not be doing my job today. And this very special role that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me, I wouldn't be filling that role. And not only wouldn't I not be filling that role, I wouldn't be me. I wouldn't appreciate things the way I do. Everything would be different. Was it worth it? Oh, come on, let's be a little more mature. I can't answer a question like that. That's for Hashem to answer. But did it transform me? Oh, that I could answer. Yes, it did. And when we go through things, they transform us. And when we try to do things properly, that builds who we are. And it makes us into the butterflies. And that's what was happening. That's what was happening. Listen to Achashverosh's response. Esther comes to the Melech, to the king, perhaps speaking to Achashverosh and to Hashem at the same time, and says to the Melech, please rescind the Gzeira. Take the Gzeira away. I no longer want this Gzeira. Like we do. Like we say, take this Gzeira away. So Achashverosh answers, I gave you the house of Haman. Think about what that means. The house of Haman represents all of the possessions and kinyanim that Haman had, which is a lot of power and a lot of money and a lot of ability. And all of that was transferred over, instead of being used to fight the will of Hashem, was transferred over from the world of Tumah, of rebellion, of anti-Semitism. All of that power was transferred over to the world of serving Hashem, being close to Hashem, connecting with Hashem, right? That's what it means. The house of Haman went to Esther. Esther put the Gadol Hadar in charge. You think Mordechai HaTzadik needed extra real estate? This was about taking control of a world in Olam Hazeh that could be used to further the Kiddush Hashem, for sure, right? There's no doubt that that's what it is. So the Melech tells Esther, you want to take back the decree? Don't you realize what happens from a decree? I gave you the house of Haman. I hung Haman on a tree. We managed to destroy Ra in this world. We rid the world of its worst enemy. We wouldn't have done that without the Gzeira. So we're not rescinding the Gzeira. We're going to try to bring a Yeshua. We're going to try to bring it to its finish line. Yes, write new Svarim. The Jews could fight back. We're going to fight. But the Ksav Shenechtav B'Ksav HaMelech Ein Lahashiv. But when a Gzeira goes out, it doesn't go back. I was listening to my Rosh Hashiva speak on Purim. I was listening today to a recording of my Rosh Hashiva speaking on Purim the year before COVID, when it was still a normal Purim. And I don't know if he meant exactly what I'm about to say, but while he was speaking, this is what occurred to me. That there's this mitzvah, Livisume Bepuria, to become shikar on Purim, whatever that might mean, different shitas and so on. I'm not getting into that right now. But there's this idea of not knowing the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman, right? We've heard that, right? Now, I hope that bothers you, okay? Because I can't imagine that if someone doesn't have das, that they don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. You could become as drunk as a human being is capable of becoming, and I am sure that you will say Baruch Mordechai or Haman. Maybe your mouth will get confused, it happens, but you will know the difference. You will know the difference. If you've ever had the fascinating zechus to see a true Talmud Chacham shikar, ask him if he knows the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. And there are annoying kids that go around asking, they do that on Purim. But you always know the difference, because that's who we are. Of course we know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. You know what the pshat is? The pshat is that the Mordechais of this world are to bring about the Ratzon Hashem. And the Hamans of this world, the Gzeiras, the challenges, the weights, are also here to bring about the Ratzon Hashem. And when we deal with the Nisayan properly, we don't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Arur Haman. Because the good things that happen to us, check for Avodas Hashem. The bad things that happen to us, the Arur Hamans in our life, check also for Avodas Hashem. So it's Lo Yada on Purim, the day, think about Purim for a second. Imagine if Haman never made a Gzeira. It would have been good, right? No Gzeira.
Wouldn't have Purim.
But we wouldn't have Purim. There would be no Kimu v'Kiblu. It was a new Kabbalah Satira out of love. All of us, every one of you, has rooted in your neshama a certain sense of enthusiasm and excitement for the Torah that we were makabel. Sometimes it's easier to feel, sometimes it's harder to feel, but it's wired into the neshama of a yid. You got that Purim time. Okay? We wouldn't have had it. All the love that's created from the mitzvahs of Purim, the connection that we talked about last time, the connections between people, the unity of Klal Yisrael, we wouldn't have that. It would be this week, would be Adar, and you'd be cleaning for Pesach. That's it. And you wouldn't have to worry about where to put all the Shalos Manas. Okay? But there would be no Purim. We would lose all the matanos of Purim. There would be no Me'avas HaNeis. There will be no Laihudim Haisa'ira V'Simcha V'Sasayin V'Ikar. There will be no Messiah of Purim. So tell me, Haman was good or bad? Well, it depends how you look at it. Yeah, it was bad at the time, it seemed bad, but in the big picture of history, we stepped up by the Megillah. We had things to fix. When Klal Yisrael realized the Gzeira of Haman, they knew they had to do tshuva. They had done Averis, they had to do tshuva. Did they do tshuva? They sure did. Did they return to Hashem with their whole hearts? Absolutely. We have a fast day tomorrow, and part of the legacy of that fast day is the tshuva that Klal Yisrael did. We handled that Arur Haman pretty nicely. Now you could tell me which was more chashuv, the Baruch Mordechai or the Arur Haman. Lo Yada? I don't know. They're both pretty important for our future. That's a Lo Yada ben Baruch Arur Haman, the Baruch Mordechai. And I think that it's a chizuk for us. When Purim comes, there's a certain sense of wanting it to be a joyous day. I spent a lot of time, I mentioned this by the last shir, and I spent a lot of time speaking mostly to men about this, but also to women about making Purim a enjoyable, pleasant, inspiring day for women as well. And I'm grateful for the other shiurim in town that also worked on trying to build an awareness of the role that women play in the celebrating Purim. But Purim is a simcha of Purim. Many of us are going into Purim. Okay, we have a lot to be grateful for. We have a lot to be happy about. There's a lot that we thank Hashem for. Haidul Hashem Kitayv. There's a lot to be grateful for. But we also have heavy hearts. We still have brothers and sisters in Gaza. We still have anti-Semitism on the rise. We still have massive attacks of arson and other kinds of attacks around the world on a much greater frequency than ever in my lifetime. We live in a difficult time, and personally, families are struggling. Families are struggling financially. Families are struggling with health. Families are struggling emotionally. It's their struggles. And then Purim comes and we go, yay, it's a simcha. And in a way, the men who are drinking have it easy because they have a little bit of help getting to that point of simcha if they use it properly. But the truth is that that's not a good approach. In other words, what am I supposed to do when Purim comes? Is Purim supposed to be a time that I forget my struggles? Or perhaps Purim could be a time that I could be more mashlim and feel more chizuk about my struggles. And I want to suggest that if we celebrate Purim trying to forget about our problems, we'll have some simcha. There is such a thing as putting our issues aside. We do that sometimes. We just put our tsar aside and we try to enjoy and try to feel close to Hashem. But I want to suggest that the essence of Purim is understanding that the challenges are part of the plan and that they're part of our growth and that they're coming from Hashem with love. The Baruch Mordechai comes from Hashem with love and the Arur Haman comes from Hashem with love. Lo Yada. And Purim is a day that we experience that. So let's try to be mechazik ourselves to go into Purim with the joy of knowing that we are being taken care of, that there's a cheshbon, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us completely, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows every bit of tsar in our hearts, and He's interested in it and involved in it, and He has a reason for it, and that there is a simcha at the end of that journey. And perhaps we can go into Purim, instead of just shoving the pain to the side, perhaps we can go into Purim alleviating some of the pain with our newfound chizuk and emunah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what He's doing, and He has a plan for us. And then we can get involved in giving shalach manos, because it's a celebration, not just of what happened all those hundreds of years ago, but it's a celebration of our own joy, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us so much. There's so much good in our lives, but even the difficult is good. And maybe that's hard to feel the rest of the year. But on the day of Adelo Yoda, Baruch Mordechai La'or Haman, I'm confident that there's a special strength that we have to feel that. So don't be surprised if when Purim comes, if you think about this, shir, don't be surprised if you start smiling. Don't be surprised if you feel a little bit lighter and a little bit of simcha. You know what? The Arur Hamans are also for my benefit. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking care of me. And I can rejoice. And I'm going to give my Mishleach Manos, not just because it's an obligation. It certainly is very, very tiring, exhausting, the day of Purim. But I'm going to give my Mishleach Manos because I am having a party. Because I am giving out presents to people. Because I am having a great day of celebrating Hashem's love for me. So I would like to share that with you and give you Shalach Manos. And I would like to accept Shalach Manos from you and share your joy and your happy day that you recognize that Hashem loves you. And I want to sit by a Suda. And I want to eat some good food. And I want to listen to some Zmiros. And I want to think about how fortunate I am to have been chosen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to be loved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And while we're in that moment of that intimacy with Hashem, where we will try to gain a little bit of clarity, that even the difficult things are being given to us with love, we're going to say a tefillah, because tefillah on Purim is out of this world. And we'll say a tefillah. While we're giving the Shalach Manos, while we're eating the Suda, while we're listening to the Megillah, we'll follow in Esther's footsteps. And we'll daven to Hashem that this year we have to say that the Baruch Mordechai and the Arur Haman are both coming with love because we believe that it's true. But Be'ezer Hashem, next year, we should be able to know that the Baruch Mordechai and the Arur Haman are coming with love because we've experienced that it's true. Because Hashem will bring Mashiach, and bring us back to Eretz Yisrael and cure all the chaylim and gladden, put simcha into everyone's hearts and provide us with parnasa and bring us back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we'll be able to sing Adela Yada Bin Baruch Mordechai La'or Haman, not with faith, but having experienced it. Be'ezras Hashem Yashikayach. Thank you for coming tonight.
What was the benefit of killing Haman if it didn't take away the Gzera?
Just ridding the world of such a representative of Amalek. Haman was an Amaleki. Amalek represents every nation has a midah, and it could be used for good or for bad. But the midah of Amalek is v'lo yarei alekim, is rejecting Hashem. And to take the leader of Amalek and to publicly declare his failure and his mission, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Melech, is itself an unbelievable Kiddush Hashem and a Chizak.
Thank you.
Okay.
How does it help to say that Klal Yisrael could do self-defense?
Miguel, you want to take this? Huh?
Why can't they do self-defense in the beginning? The Jews are going to fight back.
Somebody comes to attack me, I'm gonna fight them back.
I don't know.